My name is Gary Budden. I'm a writer and editor. I'm one of 3 people now who run Influx Press, independent publisher, Influx Press. My day job is a desk editor at Titan Books. My first book, a fiction collection, coming out this year from Deading Books.
How did you get involved in independent publishing? I'm going to focus on that first of all.
I've told this story so many times. I'll be honest with you, it was kind of by accident. So it would be going back 6 years now to 2011. So, and importantly, this is before the Olympic Games in 2012 happened. And I was living in part of Hadley at the time, was being affected by it. So we're kind of near the marshes in between Clapton and Stoke Newington. And at the time I was working as an English tutor, doing a bit of writing. I was friends with Kit Kalis, obviously I do Influx with, he's a friend from way back. I think we were in the pub, we just sort of just chatting as people do, and we came up with the idea of we just wanted to do an anthology. We thought it would be fun to do a book, a collection of writing. We thought, why not do it about the area of London we were living in before the Olympics hit, and sort of trying to capture the changes that were going on in the area. And that's really how it started. Didn't know the first thing about how to put a book together. Didn't really have a grand plan. There was never even an idea at first of setting up a press. We did contact other independent presses and things like that to see if they would be interested. None of them were. They did give us very helpful advice, however. They said it's a good idea, but you should probably do it yourself. And we did, and that's really how it started. And that book did well enough, and we enjoyed the experience enough, and it made, importantly, enough money to keep going. So it all was a little bit of an accident. How do we decide what to
publish? Yeah.
That's a good question. I would say there isn't any sort of hard and fast rule. We initially started by saying Influx is site-specific literature, which is really a term I nicked from theatre, because I remember my girlfriend at the time did a lot of site-specific theatre. I was like, well, that's good, isn't it? So it's so art, I suppose, like art responding to a specific geographical location, and that seemed to fit with the kind of London writing we were doing. But how we choose stuff, I suppose, partly what we like, because I suppose I was going to say, like, an informal motto would be, we just want to publish things we would like to read that don't actually exist yet.
Yeah.
If that hopefully makes sense. Yeah. We have done open submissions briefly, but as a very small team, obviously doing this part-time in our spare time, that has kind of fallen by the wayside for the time being. So we kind of ask people to do stuff. People do approach us now. Sometimes we'll have an idea for an anthology, like last year's Unreliable Guide, but we'll have a very clear idea of what the book is and who we would like to write for it, and we'll approach them directly.
It's quite exciting. I mean, you sort of said you're doing it alongside full-time work. I mean, it sounds like a lot of work. Have you sort of found you've had to sort of be quite sacrificial in some ways to continue doing it?
I'd say I'm tired most of the time. Yes and no. I mean, is it sacrificial when it's something you enjoy doing?
Yeah.
And when I was first doing it, I worked as an English tutor, and that was a freelance thing, so it was more flexible, but it was a lot more unstable as well. So, I mean, of course there were sacrifices, but it doesn't really feel like that, because we kind of know why we're doing it. It's something I really enjoy doing, and it's afforded all of these extra opportunities. I mean, the reason I'm sitting here now. But yeah, time's always a factor. I hope at some point I'll be able to dedicate more time to Influx. I think that'll be a possibility. But we also don't put out that many books. Like, this year is a big year. We're only putting out 4 books.
Is that the most you've done in a year?
I think we did 5 in 2015. And neither of us were working full time at the time, because we had a bit of Arts Council funding. And that was still a lot of work, but I think we've got enough. Doing it for 5 years, you get enough systems in place to know how to basically how to plan properly for it and give yourself enough time.
What do you do for promotion? How do you sort of advertise, sort of raise awareness?
Let's think. Well, when we started, probably bugger all to be honest, but it was very organic. Now I think we've got quite a good system because we've been doing this for nearly 6 years now. And because Kit and I are also writers, have written for various journals, magazines. He's done a lot of journalistic work for Vice and things like that. So we're lucky now to have sort of built up our sort of contacts of journalists, reviewers, editors and things like that. But it'll still be like one of us, or probably more often Sandy now, who's the editorial assistant. she gets that job, saying we've got this new book out, we need to think who are the relevant people to contact about it. And that's simply, here's this book, here's the blurb, here's the AI sheet, the advanced information sheet. Would you like to see a review copy? And it's still doing that sort of plugging away, kind of, I suppose, grunt work. That would be the job of a whole marketing department in a bigger publisher, but we'd do that ourselves. Also contacting, I suppose, relevant writers who might be interested in the book. So you try and do that in advance if you want to get a nice, cover blurb from someone. That's not always possible at our level, but we'll send them a physical copy afterwards. And when we reprint a book, we'll add all the cover quotes. I'll be using a mailing list, obviously, MailChimp. And, you're probably aware of this, Twitter's very, very useful, I find, for all the ills of social media. I genuinely think this. I think the small presses and the kind of work we do and are interested in, it's massive. I struggle to think how we would have got to this point without it. And I think this is true of Influx Press. People, I think, sometimes will buy the book because it's from Influx Press, rather than all that book sounds interesting. I think that's the big difference, I think.
Do you think that's something that's growing, it's changing, sort of people being interested in publishers rather than texts as a way in?
I don't know. I'm sure it went on in the past before Twitter. It's equivalent to being really into sort of an independent music label, isn't it?
Yeah.
And going, I'm a huge punk fan, so I'd always buy stuff on in the noughties, like household name records. It's gonna be like, they do good stuff that I like. I'll take a punt on that because I know kind of what they're doing and I sort of trust in what they're doing.
Is there kind of more pressure on a publisher if knowing that your readers are trusting your judgment?
I don't really. Maybe it's arrogance. I don't feel that pressure.
What do you like to read? What kind of things? What specific
what do I like to read? Loads of stuff. I think in terms of fiction, I think my two favourite kinds of writing are what we'd call weird fiction, and which would be favourite writers in that genre would be people like historically would be people like Robert Aikman, M.R. James, Alden Blackwood, Arthur Mack and all that stuff, and then bringing it more up to date. I really love work by people like Aaliyah Whiteley, Nina Allen, China Mabel, everyone knows him, Jeff Vandermeer, stuff like that. I'm a big fan of that. I'm also a huge fan of, I suppose, what we call anti-pastoral sort of landscape novels. So I mentioned Ben Myers before. I admire his work very much. One of my big heroes, one of the reasons I wanted to start writing in the first place, is a guy called Niall Griffiths, who I adore his work. So it's stuff that, it's not like bucolic, it's not pastoral, it's not lovely nature, it's like nature's brutal and horrible and violent and shit, and it's all that kind of stuff. So a third kind of writing I also love, which is very different to that, it feels to me kind of similar, is, I suppose, like London fiction.
And your own writing, what do you write about?
Kind of the three things I've just described. I would say it's a mixture of weird fiction, anti-pastoral landscape writing, and a lot of London writing, and the kind of meeting of those three things, definitely.
And your book,
Hollow Shores, yes.
Is that a novel, or is it short stories?
it is short stories. It is a book of interconnected short stories, as in there's an overarching theme. The stories share both locations and characters. It isn't a novel, I'm going to be very clear and say that. People like to say, oh no, it's a mosaic novel or something like that. No, it isn't, but I mean, it's kind of the culmination of about 5 years of stuff, and I had this set of stories that were all linked together. I wrote some new stories for the book as well to sort of tie it all together, and it just felt, I'd sort of been doing it unconsciously for a while, just, I think that's for my own pleasure really, like sort of putting in a reference from one story to another one, making characters overlap, which obviously no one else would have noticed unless they were reading all my disparate bits of stories published here, there and there. And then I've been chatting to Dead Ink about it. I was like, actually, I think I do have something here, and it required a bit of re-editing, writing new stuff. But yeah.
How would you describe your own style?
My own style. I think my own style is a lot more melancholic than I am, if that makes sense. It was described by Nina Allen, who's some work I love, as very clipped, almost terse, which I think that's quite accurate, but melancholy is what I describe it as. Yeah.
It's a good word. Do you feel that the working as a publisher has affected the way you write?
Oh yeah, definitely. Working as an editor, I think, definitely helps your own writing. I think if I look at stuff I was writing maybe 10 years ago, I'll just look at it and wince. I think it's just terrible. I think some of the ideas in it were quite good, but what it helped me as, because I also worked as a fiction editor for Ambit magazine for a while, I've run some stories, you just get very, you realise reading through slush piles what all the cliches are quite quickly. You're like, oh god, here's another story about someone breaking up with their girlfriend. Here's this phrase, it's always used. You start noticing things like how everyone in fiction drinks whiskey, they never drink gin and tonics. How everyone always has black coffee that's as like strong as steel. I'm not joking as well, you see it all the time, and then once you're like, okay. Then I recognise it in my own work, and I think, okay, let's not do that, let's try and do something different. What is a novel? What is a novel? It's one narrative, isn't it? Sustained over whatever we want to call book length. Now people debate on what that is. That's a really tough question, Scott. What is a novel?
Well, I mean, you've definitely not written one. I
haven't written one because it's... they were all originally written as short stories, intended to be short stories. So the book has a very sort of, I suppose, patchwork structure. It doesn't follow one story arc. I know, and of course I know you don't have to, a novel doesn't have to do that. I know, it's a tough one, isn't it? Like a book, recent-ish book I really loved is Grief is the Thing with Feathers, by Max Porter, which is billed as a novel. I was like, is that a novel? I don't know.
Yeah, I think...
Do you see what I mean? I think in a way, yeah, it is, but it is a overarching narrative. It's much more of a novel than mine is, but it's very short. It's almost like prose poetry at times. Do you know, I don't really know. I don't massively care either about what the answer to that is. I'm more interested in something, and it sounds very simple, but I kind of mean it, if something's good or not.
Yeah, that's good.
So it's like, we could argue for hours about what a novel is. How does that help us, whatever argument, or sorry, whatever end result we get to? I don't know. But to clarify, why I've said it's not a novel is because I have seen a few books that I think have been, and this isn't the author's fault at all, this will be the publisher going, we'll sell more books if it's a novel. That is true, because there is an aversion, I think still in Britain at least, to the short story. Maybe that's changing a little bit now. So you can say something is like a mosaic novel, an interconnected novel of stories, things like that. It just seems disingenuous to me. I wanted to say what it is. It's not just a collection of random stories, but it's not a novel either.
What's the purpose of your writing?
Great question. What is the purpose of my writing?
I mean, that sounds like quite disparaging.
Yeah.
That's not what I mean.
Why do people want to write in the first place? It's not just to entertain. It's not obviously not just to pay the bills. It's I think why anyone wants to write creatively is to sort of. It sounds so hippyish, to express yourself, I suppose. To try and sort of formulate those sort of feelings and thoughts that you have inside you, and try and make sense of them in some way, and get them down on the page and work on them and work it out really. And for me, it was like I want to focus on the things I find of interest, and try and then convey that to other people.